The hum of the Galactic Assembly's vast chamber echoed across the room as representatives of countless alien species gathered. The air was thick with the weight of centuries of history, political alliances, and unspoken rivalries. For the first time in eons, humanity's delegation stood at the heart of this monumental space, a room designed for the most powerful beings in the galaxy. They were latecomers, their species barely scraping into the galactic elite, yet their presence now hung like an unanswered question. Captain Logan led the human group. He was a sharp man, not particularly tall but commanding in presence. He wore a tailored suit of matte black with angular designs etched in silver, fitting perfectly into the technological tapestry of the room, yet somehow standing apart from the others. His dark eyes scanned the assembly with the kind of sharp focus that could pierce through the complex political facade of the alien leaders. Logan's team was just as diverse, a mix of soldiers, diplomats, and scientists. Each of them had been handpicked for their ability to adapt to any situation, to think on their feet, and to survive where others would falter. Among them, Lieutenant Torres, a seasoned tactician, was already assessing the room. Her eyes darted from one alien faction to the next, her mind working through 1,000 possible scenarios. Behind them, Dr. Silas Green, a scientist with a penchant for reading alien behavior, tapped away at a sleek portable device, compiling data in real time. None of them showed even the slightest sign of tension. But every alien in the room was staring. The other species seemed to tower in comparison, their physiques and armor grandiose, each more intimidating than the last. The Crawl, a race of insectoid warriors, their carapaces gleaming like oil-slicked armor. The Orathi, with their 6 limbs and silken, translucent skin that shimmered under the bright lights. And the Del Nor, a tall and regal species, their gold-veined skin glowing faintly with a soft light, their aura exuding power and refinement. Each alien in the room had its own unique traits, each more impressive than the next. But the humans, a species just beginning to dip their toes into this vast ocean, stood out only for their defiance. There was one question on every alien's mind. Why were the humans here? They had earned no significant alliances, hadn't participated in galactic wars, and carried no visible weaponry, unlike everyone else in the chamber. The Del Nor had massive energy shields at their side, their ambassador, flanked by 2 sentient AI drones that hovered silently. The Crawl's ambassador bore a terrifying set of shock spears, which could disintegrate a body with a touch. The humans, however, came empty-handed. Their leader, Logan, walked forward, with no weapon at his side, no visible armor, not even a hint of military tech. His calm demeanor made every alien leader uneasy. The murmurs grew louder as the humans moved toward the center of the room, their steps measured, purposeful. The tension was palpable, and every alien in the chamber could sense it. It wasn't just curiosity they felt, but a strange growing discomfort. There was something about the humans, something unpredictable. Logan stepped up to the podium with an effortless grace, scanning the room as if he had done it 1,000 times. He knew the importance of this moment. He could feel the eyes of every representative burning into him, waiting for him to speak, to reveal what humanity had to offer. He cleared his throat and spoke with a calm confidence that immediately demanded attention. "We come to the assembly not to make allies," Logan said, his voice steady and sharp. "Not to beg for recognition. We come to learn, to understand what it means to be a part of something greater than ourselves. Humanity has no illusions about its place in the galaxy. We're new. We're unpolished. But we've survived what no other species thought possible." There was a pause in the room, as if the air itself had thickened. Alien eyes shifted from one leader to the next. The words were not an apology, nor were they a boast. It was a statement, one that resonated like a challenge. "You've heard of us, of course," Logan continued, now leaning slightly forward, locking eyes with the Del Nor ambassador. "We've managed to survive through what some would call reckless abandon, others innovation. We are adaptable." A ripple of confusion spread through the room. The word adaptable hung in the air, and for a moment no one knew how to respond. The Crawl ambassador narrowed his multifaceted eyes. He had fought in countless wars, battled species much older and more powerful than humanity. The notion that a species could rise without the customary weaponry, without the traditional markers of a war-ready race, was almost insulting. How could they trust such a species? And yet, Logan's voice rose, clear and direct. We are the species forbidden from carrying weapons here. In this assembly, we walk unarmed, with no defenses of our own. Is that a sign of weakness, or is it something else? Why is humanity the only species without that privilege? The room went still. Every ambassador exchanged glances, their minds racing to process the question. Some tried to dismiss it with a mental flick, others considered it with more gravitas. But they all shared one underlying sentiment: fear. They were uneasy. "Explain yourself, human," barked the Crawl ambassador, his voice sharp and insectile, like the clicking of distant claws. His eyes glinted with disdain, perhaps trying to mask the discomfort Logan had provoked. "Certainly," Logan said, unmoved. "But let me first ask, why don't we carry weapons? You all have them. Some are literal walking arsenals. So why is it that a species just entering the galactic fold is somehow deemed unworthy of carrying its own tools for survival? Why is humanity the only one barred from that?" The question hit harder than anyone expected. The Del Nor ambassador opened his mouth, then hesitated. The Crawl, usually so confident in their martial prowess, seemed unnerved. The silence in the room stretched, as each species considered the implications of Logan's words. "Well?" Logan pressed. "Why not weapons?" At that moment, an odd silence enveloped the room, one that felt too thick, too deliberate. It was as if the air itself was waiting for something. The aliens, unaccustomed to being challenged so openly, exchanged quiet murmurs, but none of them seemed prepared to answer. The question hung in the air, unresolved, like an itch no one dared scratch. And then, before any reply could form, a sudden pulse of energy cracked through the room. It was subtle at first, a vibration, a hum that rattled the chamber's walls. The voices quieted instantly. Every eye turned toward the ceiling, the source of the disturbance. Something was coming. The humans stood firm. Their faces were unreadable. Logan, though, was smiling, but it wasn't a smile of humor. It was a smile of recognition. This wasn't a simple assembly meeting. This was something much bigger. And humanity, with all its unpredictability, would be at the heart of it. The room went completely still. "Prepare," Logan murmured under his breath. "This is where it begins." The question of why humans were forbidden weapons was no longer just a political quip. It was the beginning of something far more dangerous, something the galaxy hadn't seen coming. And the real question was no longer why they were forbidden weapons. It was how far humanity would go to rewrite the rules. And the galaxy would soon find out. Too many. The stillness of the chamber deepened as the pulse of energy reverberated through the walls. A low hum spread across the room, rattling the delicate patterns of the floating holographic projections. The assembled aliens, once so confident in their positions, now stiffened. Their eyes darted to the ceiling, to the walls, to the humans standing unshaken before them. The room was no longer a place of political posturing. It was a place where something far more dangerous had quietly slipped in. Logan remained calm, his expression unreadable. The hum grew louder, more pronounced until it reverberated in the bones of every being present. His eyes flicked briefly to his team. Torres, calm as ever, her fingers lightly tapping a series of signals into the edge of her wristband. Dr. Green was already calculating, his eyes flashing with rapid bursts of data as he analyzed the shift in the energy field. The rest of the humans stood silent, their faces tight with focus. They knew something the others didn't. They were ready for this moment. It was why they were here. The alien leaders were whispering among themselves now, their once imposing airs cracking as they murmured in confusion. A low rumble passed through the chamber, and someone was approaching. There was no doubt that this wasn't some minor disruption. It was deliberate, and it was fast. The Crawl ambassador, ever the warrior, growled under his breath, his claws tapping against his armored wrist. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice a sharp hiss. Logan, unfazed by the building tension, didn't flinch. "It's what happens when you underestimate a species, Crawl," he said, his tone level. "You all think you know the rules, the order of things, but you don't." The words hung in the air, but before the Crawl could retort, a massive tremor shook the ground beneath them. The Del Nor ambassador's skin flickered in surprise, its normally serene golden glow dimming for the first time. They too were beginning to understand. This wasn't a simple diplomatic negotiation. This was a test, and it wasn't the humans being tested. Logan turned his head slightly, his eyes narrowing as the hum intensified into a low, melodic vibration. This was no accident. This was calculated. Dr. Green's fingers flicked across his device, feeding a series of complicated calculations into the air. "We're not alone," he muttered to Logan, his voice quiet but heavy with certainty. "They've been tracking us since we arrived, and they're here now." The Crawl shifted uneasily. "Who?" he snarled. His question was directed at Logan, but the human leader didn't respond right away. Logan had already made his move, already calculated the risks and their response. The others, the so-called elite species of the galaxy, had dismissed humanity as unpredictable, as a nuisance, but now they were seeing it for what it was: dangerous. "Who is here, Logan?" The Del Nor pressed, his voice clipped. "Answer now, or—" Logan raised his hand, silencing the room. "You'll know soon enough. I'm not here to give you answers. I'm here to make you ask the right questions." Torres stood a few paces behind him, her jaw tight as she scanned the walls. "It's coming from below," she said, her voice steady. "It's trying to adapt, to mask itself from us, but it's not working." The alien representatives looked at each other, their expressions a mix of frustration and confusion. They couldn't understand how the humans were so composed, so certain. They had never dealt with a species that didn't fall apart under pressure. Humans with no apparent armor, no advanced weapons, no cosmic strength. How could they remain so calm in the face of this? The answer hit them all at once. The humans had no need for those things. A sudden, sharp crack sounded from below, followed by the unmistakable screech of metal. The Crawl's claws extended, ready for battle. The Orathi's muscles flexed beneath their translucent skin, preparing for a fight. But Logan's voice cut through the rising tension like a blade. "Don't." His tone wasn't a command, it was a warning. The humans stood motionless, their eyes trained on the far corner of the room, where a series of metal plates had begun to warp and twist. The vibrations were growing stronger, more aggressive. It was clear that the threat had been underestimated by everyone, except the humans. "You're not ready for this," Logan said softly, the words dripping with quiet menace. "None of you are." The aliens had fought wars across galaxies, crushed rebellions, and eliminated threats in an instant. Yet this, a simple disruption in their most revered space, was something they couldn't control, something they hadn't prepared for. The chamber's ceiling cracked open, revealing a cold, unfamiliar light. The force that had been building beneath them erupted into view, and the air suddenly grew cold, the temperature dropping drastically. The humans remained unfazed, but the Del Nor's glowing skin dimmed in shock. The Crawl hissed in alarm, stepping back, his weapon raised. The Orathi flinched, but there was nothing they could do. The threat was upon them, and all of their technology, their superior strength, their advanced weaponry. It all meant nothing in this moment. The humans had known this was coming. They had been tracking the presence from the moment they set foot in the chamber. But the aliens had been blind to it, arrogantly convinced that they could control the flow of events. Logan's eyes met the Del Nor ambassadors, and for the first time since entering the room, Logan's expression was cold, calculating. "You wanted to know why humans don't carry weapons? We're not allowed weapons because we don't need them." The room fell silent. The lights flickered as the unknown force made its presence fully known. It was not a fleet, not a mass of ships or soldiers. No, it was something far more insidious. The air buzzed with the unmistakable energy of something far greater than any one species in the room. "We don't need weapons because we've already learned something you haven't," Logan continued. "We've learned to adapt. We've Learned how to use your strengths against you. Before anyone could respond, the chamber's walls groaned and the floor buckled. There was no hiding from the magnitude of what was coming. Logan's team moved with fluid precision. Torres sent out a signal, her movements deliberate and fast. Dr. Green's eyes flashed as he pulled up more data. They weren't reacting to the force anymore. They were controlling it, shaping it. The others were only beginning to realize that the humans hadn't just walked into this room. They had orchestrated it. Logan turned back to the gathered alien leaders, his voice now low but tinged with a quiet power. You thought we were the weak link, but you've just learned your first lesson. And then the blast came. It was a force unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Not in a traditional sense, but a wave of energy so pure, so cutting, it tore through the arrogance of every leader present, leaving them only with one thought. Humanity wasn't just a threat. It was the future. The chamber collapsed inward, and as the last of the vibrations rattled through the bones of the assembly hall, Logan whispered to his team, "Now, we see who's really in charge." The tremors had subsided, but the echoes lingered. The room was a wreck, debris scattered like forgotten memories across the scorched floor. The once imposing alien leaders stood frozen, eyes wide in disbelief as they processed the aftermath. Their collective arrogance, their certainty that they controlled this space had evaporated. In its place was a deep, creeping sense of uncertainty. Something they could no longer ignore was there, lingering in the air like a predator's presence. Logan stood in the center, his posture relaxed but his eyes cold. His team was already moving to secure the perimeter, their efficient, silent movements a stark contrast to the panic now spreading among the alien dignitaries. They had believed they were in control of the negotiations, of the fate of humanity. But the lesson they had just received was far from subtle. "Impressive," the Crawl ambassador said. His voice strained as he surveyed the damage. His fingers twitched, the natural impulse of a warrior trying to control his instinct to strike. But his strength was gone, diluted by something he couldn't understand, something human. Logan didn't respond immediately. He wasn't here to talk to the Crawl, nor to appease their fragile egos. He had other matters to attend to. His eyes darted briefly to Dr. Green, who was now at a console, his hands moving swiftly across the touch-sensitive interface. The scientist's face was drawn, his expression tense. "They've seen us now," Dr. Green muttered, "but they're not seeing us correctly." "That's the point," Logan replied, his voice smooth but edged with the tension of what was to come. Torres joined them, her face a mask of focus. "They've locked down all external systems. We're cut off from communication with the rest of the fleet. It's a total lockdown." Logan nodded. That wasn't unexpected. The aliens had to preserve their authority, their power. But they didn't understand one crucial fact. The humans had prepared for this moment long before stepping onto their ship. "What do we do now?" Torres asked, her eyes scanning the room, waiting for the next move. "We make them understand," Logan said simply, "that no matter how much they lock us down, no matter how much they try to isolate us, we're already inside their heads." The alien leaders had gathered themselves, their confusion turning to anger, then to suspicion. The Crawl, ever the warrior, had pushed his way to the front, his long claws clicking ominously on the floor. "You think you can manipulate us?" he sneered. "You think you've broken our resolve?" Logan's gaze locked with the Crawl's, and for a moment, there was an understanding between them. The Crawl had underestimated humans, and now that mistake was on full display. "No," Logan said, his voice quiet but full of intent. "I don't think I've broken your resolve. I think I've shown you that it was never as strong as you believed." The Crawl's lip curled in contempt, but there was doubt there. Now. Doubt in the way his eyes flickered to the others, the way his posture stiffened. Something had shifted, and it wasn't just the room shaking with the aftermath of an unexpected event. Something deeper had cracked inside the alien psyche, the eye. Delinor ambassador, once serene and calm, had lost its collected composure. Its face, usually lit by an ethereal glow, was dimming, flickering. It was processing, and the signs were unmistakable. It couldn't understand how a species like humanity had managed to destabilize everything it thought it knew. The delicate, social structures that had governed galactic politics for eons were now threatened by a simple truth. The humans had come here not just to negotiate, but to redefine the rules. "You've made your point," the Arathi muttered, their voice clipped. The deep, resonant tones now laced with suspicion. "Now what? What is it that you want from us?" Logan looked at them, his gaze sharp. "I don't want anything from you," he said, his voice rising with quiet authority. "I don't want your ships. I don't want your technology. Hell, I don't even want your respect." The Arathi's expression shifted, a frown deepening. "Then why are we here?" "To teach you something," Logan replied. "To teach you that there are things you can't control, no matter how advanced. You think you are. Things you can't predict even with all your power." The room was silent now, each alien processing the weight of the statement. They had believed their superiority was absolute. They had believed that the negotiations were a formality, a matter of time before they were able to impose their will on the humans. But something had shifted, and Logan was the catalyst. The Crawl's voice broke the silence. "You've only delayed the inevitable. The Council will respond, and it won't be a diplomatic response. We are many, and you are few." Logan smiled, but there was no humor in it. The Council, the one that stands in fear of something they don't even understand, the one that's used to bullying weaker species into compliance. He shook his head slowly. "You haven't seen anything yet." The Delnor's voice, usually calm, trembled now. "What have you done?" It was a whisper, an unspoken fear that hung in the air. "What are you planning?" Logan stepped closer, his presence commanding attention. "We're not planning anything, not yet." He paused, letting the weight of the moment sink in. "We're just showing you that your galaxy, your little corner of it, is about to get a lot more chaotic. And it's going to be because of us." The words hung in the air, thick with the implication of everything that had just been revealed. The humans had come here, not as diplomats, not as conquerors, but as agents of change. They had not brought war, nor had they demanded peace. They had brought a shift in perspective, a disruption that would force the galaxy to see them not as insignificant insects, but as something far more dangerous. "You'll learn," Logan said quietly, his voice carrying a dangerous weight. "That's all I want, for you to learn. And then maybe you'll understand why the humans are the only species forbidden from carrying weapons in the assemblies." The chamber fell deathly silent. The alien dignitaries, once so certain of their place in the galaxy, now found themselves doubting everything they thought they knew. In that silence, in that moment of realization, the humans had won the most important battle. Not for control, not for dominance, but for the truth. And as the final vibrations of the room settled, Logan turned away. "Let's go," he said, simply, his voice quiet, confident. His team followed without hesitation. The galaxy had just changed, and the humans were the ones who would make sure no one ever forgot why. The council meeting was supposed to be the culmination of decades of preparation, a moment when the galaxy's dominant species would finally unite under one banner. Yet now, in the vastness of the galactic chamber, there was an air of disbelief, a tension so thick it seemed to warp the space around them. The alien leaders, once so sure of their place in the universe, were now caught in the aftermath of humanity's daring challenge. Their superiority had been called into question, and they were struggling to comprehend the depth of the threat. What had started as an exercise in diplomacy had quickly escalated into something far more dangerous. Logan stood in the center, calm as ever, his mind already working through the next steps. His team was positioned around the room, ready for whatever came next. They had made their statement, but now they needed to ensure it wasn't dismissed as a fluke. The galaxy had witnessed what humans were capable of, but this was only the beginning. The aliens hadn't yet understood the full scope of their actions, and that was the next piece of the puzzle Logan intended to solve. "The Council is furious," Torres said, her voice low but steady. "They've already begun rallying. Their forces." Logan nodded, unfazed. "Let them. The more they underestimate us, the better." Dr. Green, who had been working in the background, looked up from his console. "There's a data burst coming in from the crawl fleet. They've made a mistake, Logan. They've triggered a cascade event. Their network is compromised." A slight smile tugged at the corner of Logan's mouth. "That's exactly what we needed." The crawl ambassador had been the first to challenge Logan's team directly, underestimating the capabilities of humans and their ability to adapt. He had thought their sudden display of force would be an isolated incident. But now, it was clear. The crawl had miscalculated. The cascade event wasn't just an accident. It was a deliberate move, a signal that they had underestimated humanity's ability to think several steps ahead. "What's our next move?" Torres asked, her voice sharp, always thinking ahead. Logan's eyes narrowed as he considered the situation. "We have to make sure the Council sees us for what we are now. Not a weak species to be dismissed, but a force to be reckoned with. We've already planted the seed of doubt. Now we let them question everything they thought they knew." "Are you suggesting we push even harder?" Torres asked, her brow furrowing. "Exactly," Logan replied, turning to look out at the vast expanse of stars visible through the chamber's translucent walls. "We've only scratched the surface. The real power comes when you force them to see the world through a new lens. When you show them that every move they make will be watched, analyzed, and turned against them." The silence in the room was thick with anticipation. Every alien present had watched as the humans demonstrated their cunning, their ability to turn the tables on their would-be captors. But now, Logan wasn't just looking to protect humanity. He was looking to elevate it. The galaxy needed to know that humanity wasn't just capable of survival. It was capable of revolutionizing everything. "They've isolated us," Dr. Green said, his voice tinged with frustration. "The Council doesn't trust anything from the crawl anymore. Their transmissions are locked down." Logan's expression remained unchanged. "Then we'll make them trust us. We'll give them a reason to." Torres tilted her head, her curiosity piqued. "How?" Logan met her gaze, a quiet intensity in his eyes. "By showing them that when we're cornered, we don't just fight. We make them beg for mercy. They think they can control us, isolate us. But what they don't realize is that the humans they've underestimated are the same humans who've survived everything. Now we'll show them why we're forbidden from carrying weapons in their assemblies. Because we don't need weapons." The words hung in the air, and for a brief moment, even Torres seemed to hesitate, the weight of what Logan was saying sinking in. The aliens had failed to recognize that the human spirit wasn't something that could be crushed by technology or force. It was something different. It was an unpredictable, volatile force of its own. The Orathi ambassador, who had been quietly observing the proceedings, finally spoke up. "What do you want from us?" he asked, his voice a mixture of awe, fear, and fascination. Logan turned his attention to the Orathi, who seemed to shrink under his gaze. "Nothing," Logan said simply, "but you'll give us something we never asked for, respect. And once you understand that, we'll be even." The silence stretched, on as the alien leaders exchanged wary glances. They were beginning to see it now, the true nature of what had just unfolded. They were no longer in control. The humans had forced their hand and they were trapped in the web of their own arrogance. Logan's voice cut through the silence once more. "You think you know what we're capable of. You think you've seen all the moves in our playbook. But you haven't. The game has changed. Now you either adapt or you get left behind." The crawl's jaw clenched. He had been the first to doubt, and now he found himself questioning everything he thought he knew. It was impossible for him to fathom that a species so young, so disorganized, could suddenly rise to challenge a galactic order that had stood for millennia. The concept of a species like humanity changing the rules was something the crawl couldn't understand, and it terrified him. The Del Nor was still quiet, processing the enormity of it all. Their race had always prided itself on its ability to observe and understand, but this was something new. It was a challenge they had never faced before. There was no manual for dealing with an enemy that wasn't an enemy at all. Humans didn't follow the patterns they were used to. They were chaotic, unpredictable, and, worse still, creative. That creativity was their greatest weapon. "What happens now?" the Arathi asked, his voice trembling slightly. "Will you destroy us?" Logan shook his head. "No, we're not here to destroy anyone, but don't mistake that for mercy. We'll force you to see us as equals, and we'll make sure you never forget why you thought you could control us in the first place." As Logan spoke, the tension in the room began to shift once again. The aliens were no longer angry. They were confused, unsure. The fear had set in, and it was growing. "We're the ones who decide the future now," Logan said, his voice steady and firm, "and you'll be forced to watch it unfold." The words were final, and in that moment the council realized the truth. The humans had not come to negotiate. They had come to change the entire balance of power, and the galaxy was going to have to learn to live with that. As Logan turned to leave, he didn't look back. He knew that the final word hadn't been spoken, not by a long shot. But one thing was certain: the universe would never be the same again.